I think in a very real sense, the Jewish people are in peril today in a way that they haven't been for a very long time. And the comfort level that anti-Semites have today in expressing their hatred of the Jewish people and the Jewish state is something that we simply haven't seen, certainly not in my lifetime. I don't know if many of you may have read today that Oliver Stone just had an anti-Semitic rant in an interview with the Sunday Times of London, where he belittled the Holocaust and talked about Jewish control over U.S. foreign policy in his trademark conspiratorial manner, essentially saying that the Jews have hijacked the United States and made too much of the Holocaust. And this is, of course, a man who has a father who is Jewish. At any rate, it's important not to be taken in by people's last names, obviously, when they're spreading lies about the Jewish people, which is, again, one of the reasons why it's so important to remain very informed about what's happening today, because only an informed Jewish people is going to be able to wake up in time to prevent terrible things from happening. And I think that when we talk about what things may happen, we have to recognize that there is really only one issue today that is of concern to the Jewish people in a very real and existential way, and it is not whether Israel will or will not pass a conversion bill. It is not whether Fatah leader Mahmoud Abbas will or will not sit down with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and talk about the partition of the land of Israel. There is only one issue that matters today, and that is the issue of whether Iran will or will not acquire nuclear weapons. Nothing else is important. Everything else pales by comparison, because if Iran is allowed to acquire the means to cause genocide, everything else will change in a way that we will find almost unrecognizable within a very, very short period of time. And before I get into exactly what will happen if Iran acquires a nuclear weapon, we have to think about where we actually stand today on the issue. And Iran, depending on who you ask, is either months away or just perhaps a year or two away from developing a nuclear arsenal. They have already, according to their own sources that came out a couple of weeks ago, they admit that they have enriched 20 kilograms of uranium to 20% enrichment, which takes them a stone throw away from weapons-grade uranium, a quantity sufficient to build 2 or 3 nuclear bombs. As far as ballistic missiles delivery mechanisms are concerned, Iran has, in the past year, launched 2 satellites into outer orbit, which means that they are well on their way to developing ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, that will be capable of attacking this country, as well as the former chief of Central Intelligence, James Woolsey, pointed out in an article in the Wall Street Journal about 10 days ago. The Shiab 3 and 4 ballistic missiles that the Iranians have already developed and are currently fielding in their arsenal are capable of attacking Europe. And of course, those missiles as well threaten not only the state of Israel, but every single country in the Middle East. And it's important to recognize that, because we think a lot about the danger that an Iran with nuclear weapons would constitute to Israel, which is important, but it's important also to understand that an Iran that has nuclear weapons will essentially be able to rule the Middle East. And, you know, some people, unfortunately, in this country, as well as in Europe beyond, are having a conversation about whether Iran can or cannot be contained, whether a nuclear arsenal in the hands of Iran's theocratic government and the Revolutionary Guards is something that you can compare to the nuclear arsenal of the Soviet Union during the Cold War. And former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, who appeared at a conference with me in Aspen last week, made a very important point. He said, with all the criticism that one must have of the Soviet Union and the fact that it was indeed the evil empire, the fact of the matter is that that evil empire was ruled by atheists. And as atheists, they were not at all concerned about the world to come, which they didn't believe in, which meant that they were essentially not suicidal, that they believed that the only rewards that they could have in life were in life itself. In stark contrast to the atheist Soviets, you have the theocratic Iranians who believe that their rewards will come in the next life and not in this one, which means that life is essentially unimportant to them. It is not sacred. Death is sacred. And somebody who sanctifies death is a completely different kettle of fish than somebody who sees nothing beyond this life. And it means that a person who sanctifies death and also develops the means to carrying out mass murder is somebody who cannot be contained, somebody who cannot be trusted with the means of causing mass death, of causing genocide. And what in fact would happen if an uncontainable Iran acquired the means to cause massive death in the region and throughout the world? I think that there are three things that we can look to in a world in which Iran, under the Mullahs, has nuclear weapons. First is massive destabilization in the Middle East and throughout the world. Second is a realignment of the states throughout the region, throughout the Middle East. And the third is nuclear proliferation, the likes of which we have never seen. So what do I mean by destabilization? Today, Israel has peace treaties with two Arab states, Egypt and Jordan. We can assume that within short order, in the event that Iran acquires a nuclear weapon, both of those peace treaties will be abrogated. Why? Because a nuclear-armed Iran, fielding terrorist proxies, including Hamas and Hezbollah and elements of al-Qaeda that are operating under the Iranian nuclear umbrella, will be able to destabilize and overthrow any regime that lives at peace with the State of Israel. We already have, of course, in the past couple of years, several instances in which Hezbollah forces allied with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt have worked together to destabilize with the intention of overthrowing the Mubarak regime. Just a year and a half ago, there was a massive plot of Hezbollah to attack ships in the Suez Canal. And again, their stated intention was to overthrow the regime by causing mass economic privation through the closure of the Suez Canal to international shipping, which is the lifeline of the Egyptian economy. And those Hezbollah terrorists were represented by lawyers from the Muslim Brotherhood, which was an overt indication of the behind-the-scenes collaboration that we now have between the Muslim Brotherhood and Hezbollah, despite the supposedly unbridgeable Sunni-Shiite rift in Islam. And that is an important thing. Of course, Jordan's Hashemite regime, which is a minority regime, is threatened both by the terrorist elements inside of Iraq, which borders Jordan, as well as by the Jordanian people themselves, who feel that they are being oppressed and repressed by the minority Hashemite regime that was installed in Jordan by the British in the 1920s. These regimes, again, facing the possibility or the prospect of being overthrown by the likes of Hezbollah, Hamas, al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood, will in all likelihood, in order to survive, abrogate their peace treaties with Israel. In the case of Egypt, specifically, you have an army that is based upon U.S. military platforms, U.S. military training. It is a conventional force unlike the force that fought Israel in 4 wars until 1973. This is a massive threat, and if you add to that the fact that Hosni Mubarak is likely going to die in the foreseeable future, we are dealing with something that is simply quite dangerous. Aside from Egypt and Jordan, of course, the Palestinians will end any prospect of peace with Israel, not that there is one today. Any leader inside of Palestinian society that would be willing to sit down and talk to Israelis could reasonably expect to be killed, because an Israeli security guarantee is going to be worth a lot less when the terrorist organizations that are fighting Israel are operating under an Iranian nuclear umbrella. This destabilization inside of the Middle East is going to cause a realignment inside of not only Israel's neighborhood in the Levant, but also in the Persian Gulf. The ambassador to the United States from the United Arab Emirates said 2.5 weeks ago at a conference in Colorado that, in fact, the states of the Persian Gulf will abandon their alliances with the United States if Iran is allowed to acquire nuclear weapons, because whether it's Kuwait or Qatar or Bahrain, all of which are threatened by Shiite separatists inside of their own societies, American troops that are currently deployed in those states, as well as, of course, in Iraq and Afghanistan, will be ejected from those states very quickly, because those states will be afraid of being destroyed by the Iranians or overthrown by proxy armies fielded by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, which will be able to attack at will anywhere they wish to, again, operating under the Iranian nuclear umbrella. So we're talking about massive destabilization and realignment of forces away from the West and towards Iran throughout the region. And of course we have the problem of nuclear proliferation, which we've already been seeing the beginnings of. Already today, as Iran approaches nuclear capability, we have the Saudis, the Egyptians, the Turks, and the Jordanians, as well as the Kuwaitis, if I'm not mistaken, all announcing their intentions of buying nuclear reactors, of developing nuclear reactors, signing deals to develop nuclear reactors with the likes of China, and Pakistan, and France, and even the United States. This kind